Alright, so we're going to launch Visual Studio 2019. And when you launch Visual Studio 2019, you see that a window like this pops up, which actually asks you to create a new project. And I've gone ahead and uh, opened up console apps already. So you can see the most recent ones tend to be closer to the top of the list of our installation here. And in particular, we're going to be doing console app.NET framework. Now, for the first few modules of this course, we're going to be doing console-based apps until we get comfortable with the language of C#. And then from there, we'll move into WPF, and then we'll get into some GUI-related stuff and really have some fun. But for now, we'll start with the basics and just getting into simple console stuff just to get used to the language itself. Now, it's assumed that you have the Java knowledge already or a similar language so that you are comfortable enough to write code. And we're going to be learning C# code under the guise of your knowledge from another language. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose console app and in particular .NET framework. Now these are my recently opened project templates. You instead would probably want to type into the search bar console, hit enter, and you can see that there's a bunch of console options here. In particular, console app.NET framework, so we're going to use for this course. So I'm going to highlight that and hit next. And I'm going to call this W1 exercise 1. So week 1 exercise 1. And I'm going to give it a home. All right. And just hit select folder, create a new solution, and make sure the checkbox here for place solution and project in the same directory is checked off, because in older versions of Visual Studio, it was a headache that you would see the SLN file, the solution file, for the projects that were generated in some other random directory. So at least it's nice that they finally, for 2019, added this checkbox here. Now in terms of framework, what version of .NET do we want to use? I'm going to be using 4.7.2. You can use an older version if you wish, depending on what the requirements for your projects are, but if you're learning like me, then 4.7.2. We'll hit create. Now it has generated a project. You'll have to forgive me, I actually have extended desktop going, so I'm going to have to keep dragging windows over. And you're going to see that it has auto-generated a project for me, and it has opened up a file that's actually called program.cs. So all of our files that are open will be based on tabs. You'll see tabs along this area here. And it generated one file called program.cs. Now, as you know from other languages, there's always a main that goes along with every application you write, and so it's automatically generated our static void main inside of a class called program, which matches the file name program.cs, and we have a namespace. So if you're familiar with Java, you know that there's namespaces in Java. There are packages in Java, and we call them namespaces here in C#. So our namespace is called W1 exercise 1. You'll see that we have the using statements here to tell the system which packages we wish to use. So we're going to use system, system collections generic, system.link, system.text, and so on. But we're going to keep it really simple. And we want to print to our console hello world. So I'm going to say console dot write line. I'm going to open up hello world and put a semicolon in. So now what we want to do is we want to run this program. And the question is, how do we run it? Well, you should see a little play button here that says start, or you can go to debug, see start with debugging, start without debugging, and we'll talk about the debugger in the next exercise, but for now, let's just see what happens when we run this. So I'm just going to click on the start button here, and we run it, you're going to see a console pop up, and it actually did on my other desktop and it ran away. And that's because by default, and as you're following along you'll find this as well, by default it will run the program, and when it's done the console window will go away. We need to keep that console window in there for a little bit longer. So the trick is to actually add a second line of code, and this line of code will go at the end of all of your console applications just so you can see the end part of your program and all the output before the window magically disappears. And that is console.read. Now there's two options. You can say read key, which will just provide an option to enter one key, or read line will allow you to type in a line of information, and essentially you hit enter and it goes away. Now if I run it, hit start, and now you see that my window has held true, and we see the word hello world. If I hit enter, it goes away, and you'll notice that the whole desktop transformed into a debugging mode. And we'll talk about debugging soon. But for now, let's have a look at Visual Studio and see what it's all about. So we've written our hello world, we've completed exercise 1, but since we're here, let's understand the different windows that are in play here. So we see, as you can tell already, this is where we write our main code, our actual code. And you can increase or decrease the font by using this little percentage. So I've gone to 150% because when I render these videos, the text comes out better when you have a larger font. And if you look to your side here under Solution Explorer, you'll see that all of our files go here. So we actually have program.cs right here. There's app settings as well over here that we can refer to. Now properties. Properties will become very important when we're doing GUI related stuff. So for now, we'll just leave it here. It's an important window to have when you're doing GUI related stuff. And when you're running your code, or when you're typing or doing anything, so for example, let's say I forget a semicolon here, you have your error window here. Right? And the nice thing is it actually has something called it has a code. Every error you have has a code. So in this case, it's CS1002. You can open up a browser. You can Google CS1002 with C# next to it, and you will find the explanation of the error and some possible solutions. So that's nice to have. So I'll put the semicolon back in. You'll also see your output here as well. You can also see output like console messages and so on. You could also see debug information here as well, which we'll talk about later. For now, we have this area here. Now, if we look to the top, of course, we have our file menus. Any window that's missing from here, you can actually go to Window and, View, and you can actually bring them in. All of these windows here. I was thinking of Mac. On the Mac, you would go to Window and you would actually have all those options to bring in. But here under View, you can actually bring in any missing window that you want. So anything that you want to add, you can. All right. Now, let's move on to our next exercise, exercise 2. So in exercise 2, what we're going to do is we're going to print out, using a for loop between 1 and 10, we're going to print out the square and the cube of that number in our index in the loop. So first, let's create a fresh project. So you would basically go to File, New Project, or Control-Shift-N, which I like doing better because moving the mouse along that area kind of gets wonky. So I'm going to say New Project. I'm going to do a console app. You should see your recent project templates here. So I'm going to use .NET Framework, and I'm going to call this W1 Exercise 2. And I'm going to put in my same location, create a new solution, place solution and project in the same directory, use the same .NET Framework at 4.72. Hit create. It wants me to save. Sure, I'll save. Save the previous project. Now we have exercise 2. Again, class program. We have an empty public static void main. So let's do this. Let's do a console write line just to give a title to each of the items that we are going to display. So we'll say console.writeLine. We'll say number. Let's give a tab, so slash t to tab. If you recall from Java, it's the same thing. Square, and then slash t and cube. And let's put in a for loop, so we'll say for int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to 10, I plus plus, and we'll say console dot writeLine. We'll say I to represent the index in the array, plus, we'll put in a slash t, so in quotes, a slash t to tab over, and then plus, and basically going to say I times I, so I times I, right? And then do a plus and a slash t and a plus again for I times I times I. And then close that off. We need one more closing round bracket and put in a semicolon there. Let's review. So we're going to say I will be in the first column, so the index. Put in a tab. Then we want to have the square, so I times I. We'll do another tab, so then we want a cube, so I times I times I. All right. Now we know this is going to disappear. So outside of the for loop, let's do a console.readLine. All right. That's our simple program just to display squares and cubes for 10 numbers. So let's go ahead and give it a run. So I'm going to hit start. Here's our output. And you should see 1 squared is 1, cubed is 1, 2 is 4 and 8, 3 is 927, and so on. We see squares and cubes. And if I hit enter, the window goes away. There we go. I have to hit it a couple of times just to get it to go away there. Now, I talked about debugging. Let's actually use the debugger here for a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to insert something called a breakpoint to stop execution mid-execution. I actually do that by clicking there. In this little gray bar here, it allows us to insert breakpoints. So when I click here on a line, the dot comes up, a red dot, and you can see that when I run it, it's going to stop right there. So I'm going to hit start, and you can see that I have number, square, cube, and my arrow here, my yellow arrow, indicates that the execution has stopped right there. And if you look above, you will see different buttons over here to represent my options. So if this is a stop sign, meaning I can just stop what I'm doing completely, go back to editing the program. So exit the execution. This is restart. This is show next statement. This is step into. So if this was a method, I could step inside the method. This is step over, which means just go to the next line, and this is step out. So if I was inside a method, I could leave that method and go to the method above it. All right. So I'm just going to use this one, step over. All right. So it's doing I is less than 10. Now it's going to do console read line. So now it's on this line of code that's in yellow. All right. And it's done it. So let's bring the console back up. So we have 111 now. And let's actually look down here. So we have two things, locals and watches. So I could enter in an item to watch, like for example, I could type in I. That'll be my variable to watch. Right now it's currently a value 1 of type int. So I can go back to locals, I can see all the different variables that are there. So as the program gets more extravagant, you can see a number of different variables, classes, and so on that you can expand upon and see what it's all about there. So I can continue stepping, but I know that this program is perfectly fine. If I do a few steps, Go back to my, so I is 4, go to my watch, yep, I is still 4, the red indicates the number changed. Go to my console, yep, it's done actually 1, 2, 3. It's about to do a console write line for 4, but I think we know how this program goes. So I can either stop or just continue on to the end. So I'll hit continue, let it go. It's actually done all 10 numbers. I'll hit enter, and it'll go away. So that's exercise 2, right? So now exercise 3 is to write a program that asks the user to do a simple arithmetic program such as like 5 plus 4, and give the user feedback whether their input was correct or not. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a random number generator and randomly generate the two numbers, and then ask the user for the answer and keep presenting the question until they get it right. After they get it right, ask if they want to try again, hit Y to continue or exit. So that's our goal for exercise 3. So what we want to do now is we want to generate a new project. So we will just do Control Shift N for a new project. I'm going to choose console app. I'm going to call this a W1 exercise 3. It's going to go into my same location and create new solution, check mark for place solution, same .NET version, hit create. Alright, so I have a fresh project to work with, fresh program.cs to work with here. So I'm going to start by generating a random number. We're going to use an object called random. So I'm going to say random. I'm going to instantiate random, call it rnd equals new random. And I'm going to declare two random numbers as int. So I'm going to say int random1, comma random2. I'm going to have a character, so I'll say char, call it ch, equals, we'll just have the letter y for yes. All right. We have a few warnings. So hey, let's go back to the error list. We have a few warnings here. Remember, the yellow indicates it's a warning. It's not an error. The big difference. So if this was a red dot, then or red X, then yes, it's an error. You wouldn't be able to run this. You'd have issues. Now, because this is a yellow triangle, it's just a warning. You are still allowed to run the program. You can compile and run. You won't have too many issues. You may have an issue. Maybe the warning is meaningful and you'll get a crash. Or maybe it's nothing. In this case, it's nothing. It's just saying it's declared but never used. We're going to fix that in a moment. So let's put in a while loop and say while ch equals the letter y. I'm going to open up a set of curlies. And let's declare a random number. Let's say random1 is equal to rnd.next. This is how we can actually get an int. And we have to specify our range. So I'm going to open up a round bracket and say between 1 and 10. All right, give me a random number between 1 and 10. Let's do the same for the second number. So random2 is equal to rnd.next for between 1 and 10. So two random numbers. Now let's set up what the correct answer will be by saying int correct ans is equal to random1 plus random2. And now let's declare a variable for what the user is going to enter. So we'll say int user ends. So now what we're going to do is we want to loop through and keep pressing the user for what the answer is. So we're going to say console.write or write line, and we'll ask the user. Now actually I should point out there's write line and there's also write. The main difference between write and write line is that with write line it automatically puts the cursor at the new line. All right. Whereas console.write, will keep the cursor on the same line after you've entered the text. So let's actually see what this means. I actually keep right here, and I'm going to say, what is, and then plus, oh, I should have a space, so be very careful. You want to have a space here, and say plus random 1 plus, let's put the plus inside of it, and then plus random 2, and then plus with a question mark. Give a space there on purpose. All right. And this way, it'll keep the cursor right here. In fact, when you see the console, like where my cursor is right now in the code, that's how it's going to look like. If I did a right line, it would actually put the cursor down here, right? Or rather, down there. Now let's get an input from the user. So we're going to say user and is equal to int.parse. So here's what's interesting is that we have int.parse, which will actually convert the text that we're going to get into an int. So I'm going to say console.readline. So console.readline returns a string. All right. So console.readline returns a string. We need to convert it to an int so we can work with it. So that's where we use int.parse to convert that string into an int. Now user ends has the answer that the user enters. Now we want to give a message whether it was correct or incorrect, so we're going to say if user ends equals correct ends, then we'll just do a console.writeLine for correct answer. All right. Else console.writeLine for wrong answer. All right. Now here's the thing. We want to repeat this block of code over and over again until the user gets it correct. So let's actually put this inside a do while. So I'm going to say do and put the closing curly over here and say while user ends does not equal correct ends. All right. Now suppose they get the correct answer. We wanted to ask the user, hey, do you want to continue? Would you like another question? So let's do a console.write for would you like another question with a y/n inside round brackets. All right. And let's get that input. Let's say ch, which is a character. So remember we have ch at the top. Declare ch here. It's a char. It's going to be equal to console.readline of index 0. Now why am I writing this? Well, console.readline is a string, but we have a char. All right. So we need to grab, we only want the first character, whatever a person puts here. They have to put the letter Y in order to get to the next question. Otherwise, anything else they put that is not the letter Y as the first character, they could put yellow, they could put no, they could put nonsense, they could put AY, and then the letter A would be the first one, but the first index of that string is what comes back to CH. All right, I think we have enough to run this. So let's give this a run. So now this is where we're going to have some fun. So what's 2 plus 7? I'm going to say 3. Wrong answer. What's 2 plus 7? 5. Wrong answer. What's 2 plus 7? Let's say 9. Correct answer. Would you like to try again? Yes. What's 3 plus 1? 2. Wrong answer. What's 3 plus 1? 7. Wrong answer. What's 3 plus 1? 4. Wrong answer. Would you like another question? Sure, one more time. It's 2 plus 9, 10. Wrong answer. Let's say 11. Correct answer. Would you like another question? No. Goodbye. Alright, so that was a little bit of fun. Let's have a little bit more fun with one more exercise. So for exercise 4, we're going to actually create an application. We'll take a similar approach to what we did just now, but we're going to create an application, a console app again, that allows the user to guess a number between 0 and 100. We're going to use a random number generator again to automatically generate the number. So we're just going to guess. If each time the user guesses, we'll say either too high, too low, or congratulations, you guessed it correctly. So let's go ahead and try this out. All right, so we're going to do a new project. So Control-Shift-N. I'm going to choose Console App, and I'm going to call it W1 Exercise 4. And same location I want as before. And create new solution, get checkbox, and 472 is what I'm using for my .NET version. Hit create. And I have my fresh public static void main. So let's start by instantiating our random number generator by saying random rnd equals new random. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and generate a random number right off the bat. So I'm going to say int random num equals rnd.next for 100. This says max value. My max value is between 0 and 100. So that's why I'm doing an rnd.next. I generate an int, call it guess. So the user will guess. Now let's do this inside a do while. So I'll say do, and we'll just get this out of the way by saying while guess does not equal random num. And let's do a console.read key just to be sure in case we wanted to read any input. We want to read the outputs of the console before it going away. So now let's ask the user to guess a random number. So we'll say console.write. We'll just say guess the random number. We'll give them an option between 1 and 99. And you notice there's an error. CS0165, use of unassigned local variable guess, meaning that I have guess here. I'm doing a while for guess, but I've never used guess, and I haven't even set a value for it. So notice that you're going to get these errors from time to time, unused values that you're trying to use, but you haven't really done anything with, so that's another error that pops up. All right, so now let's grab an input from the user. We're going to say guess equals int.parse for console.readline. Now let's use an if statement to say if guess equals random num console.writeLine. We'll say congratulations. Hope I can spell it. Congratulations. You guessed it. Else if guess was less than random num, we'll say console.writeLine for too low. Try again. And finally, else, which means that guess was greater than random, we'll say console.writeLine for too high. Try again. Alright, and we still have our while there. So this is the entire block of code here. So while guess does not equal random number. We could actually modify this program to say, would you like to try again with the while loop, just like we did in the last exercise, but we won't. Let's give it a run. Alright, so what we're seeing now is guess the random number between 1 and 99. So I'm going to say 3. Too low, try again. Let's say 66. Too low, try again. Oh, it's even higher than 66. Let's say 88. Too high. So let's see, 77. Too low. It's between 77 and 88. So I'm going to say 81. Hey, I got it. All right. And so now we've had a little bit of fun here with this game. You can run it again, just have a little bit of fun. Try again and see how often you can guess the number. But this completes the first set of questions for the first week. What we're going to do is we're going to move on to week 2 in the next video and continue on with learning more of C#.